she had an experience like with girlfriends or something where somehow the conversation came up of whether people could marry someone who had same-sex attraction.
Like, could you ever marry a guy?
And like the consensus was absolutely not.
They would
Like
not
nobody.
do that.
And you said that you even said no, right?
Yeah. Like, would you ever marry a man that was gay? But that's like from the perspective of, like when we were talking about it, would you marry a man that was gay because he wanted to have children or because he wanted to be married or whatever? And like, who would do that?
But
Yeah.
Yeah, like who would marry someone? So as we were discussing it, it was, from our perspective, it was someone who doesn't love you in the way that a man loves a woman. But, you know, you have all the other trappings of marriage.
Right.
Of course, like what woman in a theoretical sense is ever going to say, yeah, that's what I want. Like, I'm hoping my husband doesn't love me. That would be great. And so, of course, we're all like, no way, we would never.
And that's the kind of stereotype I think most people think of.
Exactly.
Either when they hear about people whose marriages didn't work, that's the way that it's represented,
Yeah.
or when they're talking about things generically. You know, it's this idea. Because I even had a friend who, I have a really close friend who knows someone who is fairly out and open now, who's out, who had divorced his wife, but who knew him when he was married. And the way that he talks about his marriage now is very different than the way he talks about his marriage when he was married. And he's like, I know that there were times that he was very happily married, but he doesn't ever talk about those times now, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of like you revise the story from whatever perspective you're at. And I think that's human nature, but...
You filter out.
Yeah. And so... you know, I have a bad day and nothing in my life has ever gone right, and I'm having a good day and nothing's ever gone wrong, right? You know, that's just kind of how things work. But with her and things that she said, you know, she's like, it's different. As we were having that conversation, she's like, it's when we're talking about like I'm marrying a person, like I'm marrying Ty, I'm not marrying someone who has same-sex attraction or a gay man or a gay Mormon or this or that, because
a faceless stereotype.
right. And you know, I mean, you know, some of the things like that, you know, she has struggled with, or can I even say like ADD or stuff?
Oh yeah,
Can I say
totally.
that? So she, anyway, so she struggles with ADD. I mean, there's just this element of when you find a person, when you meet someone that you love in a more multi-textured way, you just bring what you get what comes with the package. And I've always said that I think that, you know, everybody has a package of issues. Everybody. And as a marriage, you know, as a therapist, I know that even more so now than I ever thought theoretically. Right. Everybody has a package of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And really we just, as long as we have capacity to choose what package we're getting, like we have a say in it. Right. Like I knew, like I mean, you don't know somebody fully when you marry them. There's always going to be things that you don't know. But I think we had so many talks. Like by the time we got married, I knew her well enough to know that I wanted to marry Danielle with everything that was coming with it, and her the same way.
Well, I want to ask you Hold on, I have two questions.
Okay.
For you and for you, because I mean, you're making me think too. I've heard. I've never looked it up, but I've heard there was like a "Don't Do It, Danielle."
DanielleDon'tDoIt.com.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
You know, I haven't looked it up, but I've heard, and obviously the idea or the ethos behind it is people, you know, hopefully at least trying to do what they think is helpful. I don't know. I'm sure there were lots of belligerent people as well. But you know what I mean? Coming at you with don't do it. Why would you do it? And yeah, how would you answer that? Obviously, it's I married a person, not the stereotype.
Yeah, and I just have to say, like, when we looked at that site, and when I looked at that site, I mean, everybody knows that when you're Mormon, and especially when you're American and you're Mormon, it is a small, small world. And so I felt like it would not take much for these people to find me. It would not take much for someone to actually track me down and have a talk with me, to talk some sense into me. Like, you know, with BYU, you can look up on the alumni site anybody's email address, anybody's mailing address. Maybe after this, BYU will think about privatizing that a little bit. But like, you can find anybody. And like on Facebook, I think at the time my security was such that anybody could look me up. And I just thought, these people don't really care about me. Like, this is their issue that they're projecting onto us. And like, it was hurtful, you know, to hear and see stuff like that. Like, of course, like, you're human and things can hurt your feelings, but it didn't make me think, what am I doing? it just made me think, how rude. Like, this is the happiest time for us that we've experienced. And I also feel like protective of Ty, where I thought, so rude to say these things about like my fiance. Like, how rude of you. Like, you don't even know him. But like, as far as people who are thinking about going into a marriage with someone who has experienced same-sex attraction, who still does, it just depends on the individual. But I have talked to some women who are in similar situations as I was a year and a half ago. And my thought is, if he really loves you, and if he's, dealt with a lot of his issues around this, and he, has a strong faith in God, then there are so many pluses about it. There are so many really positive things. And that's how I've felt in my marriage, that I get so many of the positive stereotypes without having to deal with what people have as negative stereotypes of it. So for example, like Ty said, I changed the pillows, and then I was like, okay, Ty did a better job than I did. I don't have like any decorating sense. And we've had friends come over and try to guess what each of us brought to the marriage. And I brought like a commercial grade blender and pretty much everything else Ty brought, as far as like the things in our house. And also, this isn't true for everyone because it's a stereotype, but Ty tends to be a better listener than the average man. And that's probably makes him a great therapist too, but he tends to be a better listener. He tends to be more sensitive. He tends to be more comfortable with emotions in general, which is good because I'm pretty emotional. So all of like the stereotypes. Oh, he will watch shows that like some guys wouldn't touch. Ty will watch shows that I think are more interesting because he's more open to things like that. I never will be a sports widow. He doesn't ever say like, oh, guess what? It's football season and I'm going to be glued to the TV for the next couple of months. I've never had to worry about that, which for me is great because I come from a family that we are not that into watching sports on TV. My siblings played soccer and tennis and things like that, but we're not, a typical American family that's like totally into football. And so really like Ty's personality and who he is fits in so great with my family of origin that not only because of his character and who he was that attractive, but he is just a really great fit with me because of like some of these other characteristics. So
they may or may not have anything to do with
they may not,
but there are statistically some correlations.
Yeah.
So I still have one question for you, but I want to follow up. Like, how do you answer beyond what you already have said very well? This idea, like, there's women that do speak up and say, sort of in a protective sort of way, saying, enough. We've got a lot of focus on the men in these marriages. I won't call it mixed orientation. So great, and that's being addressed, but like we need to talk about these women that in some ways they insinuate a little bit like they're duped into it, or they're drawn into these relationships, because the guy is a better listener, he's a better this and that, all these
naively
characteristics,
so.
right? But naively, and sort of they are self-victimized, or and they're saying we need to speak up on behalf of these daughters of Zion, and saying I would never let my daughter marry a guy that even had anything remotely, call it whatever we want, gay, same-sex attracted, anything. How would you respond, I guess, or how do you think about that stuff?
I saw websites that same evening that I came home and like read things on the internet all night long. I saw websites of people who cautioned against it and things like that, but I felt very distinctly, this is not my story. And this is these people's experience, and this is not my experience. And so again, I think it's just a very individual question, relationship by relationship, case by case. I think that, and I feel this way about men and women, whatever it is that they're dealing with, if they have something that could be a potential issue in a marriage, that you should disclose that kind of stuff before you're married. But I'll also say, like, just from knowing so many other couples who are in mixed orientation marriages, I really believe that there are honestly a lot of, we'll say the man, just for sake of easiness, if the man was the one that struggled with same-sex attraction, I really think there are a lot of men who had not come to terms with it before they got married.
Right.
And they really loved their wives. And they were really interested in these women and wanted to build a life with them. And then suddenly, once they're married and life hits and things get hard, they realized, here's an issue that I haven't dealt with and that I thought had gone away and that didn't. And so I think that's another thing, is like, most people try to demonize these men. And it's...
And sort of victimize the wife.
Yeah, and I think that's, in very few circumstances it may have happened that way, but I think in most, it wasn't like that. In most, the man really loved his wife, wanted to marry her and build a life together, and did not fully understand how strong his feelings were, because he also had feelings for his wife. And so...
And culturally, he couldn't really engage with it. I mean, the culture wasn't there yet. And
right.
Open and,
yeah, so I think, but again, it just
like
depends.
Not
Not at all.
Right. You
and
came into this with my eyes open.
Totally. And Ty and I have talked about this, and I've told lots of people this. I feel like I bring more baggage and more issues into the relationship than Ty does. And I'm pretty sure Ty would agree, maybe not on camera, but I'm sure he would agree with that too, that most of the time when we're having like some serious discussion around, some kind of a disconnect that we may be feeling at the moment, it's usually my issues. And it's usually me that's distancing myself because of something that from my past that I haven't worked through, that I'm letting bug me, or that I'm projecting onto Ty, and feeling like I'm going to blame him for something that really is an issue that I never resolved from teenage or whatever years, and that I'm still holding on to. So,
and I think that's a pretty common problem, because I mean, like I mentioned before, like everybody has problems. Right. Everybody has a package of issues, but it seems like in circumstances like this, and granted, it can play a major. It's not to downplay, not to minimize,
but
the role that SSA plays, but I think it becomes a scapegoat often, or the woman becomes the victim when it's like, you've got, like, this is your insecurities at play. What's that?
Or the man too.
Or the man.
Yeah, just
the spouse who isn't dealing with that in particular, but it often becomes a scapegoat. And I think that it's easy to pin everything on SSA, or whatever we want to call it. And I've talked to marriages where it's like, no. Like, yeah, he's got problems, but you've got as many problems as he does. And this is your insecurities coming into play. Yeah. And it's not fair to put it all on the guy or the woman, whoever is dealing. And it needs to be acknowledged for what it is, but it can't become everything. And in too many circumstances, it becomes everything, and it becomes a scapegoat, and we pin all of our problems on this. And you shouldn't have done this. You should have been honest. Blah 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 blah.
Right. Well, yeah. Especially when you guys are definitely of a different generation. A contemporary generation where, in a sense, learning from mistakes of the past, where there was full disclosure. I'm guessing, of your experience and background. I mean, it was all out there.
Someone asked me one time. They're like, "Do you do know about Ty's SSA?" And I looked at them. I said, "He wrote a book." Yeah. Like, it's very public, I think most people that shop at Deseret Book know about Ty's SSA,
So, in your case, it's sort of laughable does she know?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and I think it's a fair point to say, like, we are in a different day. Like, I feel like what's possible now, culture's changing, not just around this, but culture's changing around a lot of things. I think marital culture, couples culture is shifting in such a way that I think marriages are healthier. Like, when they're good, they're really, really good. Yeah. And when they're not good, they're not good. Yeah. But it's people are more empowered. People are more, like, women are more empowered. And I think that was the thing with her. Like we paint, at least, and I guess I can only speak from a more modern, a contemporary perspective, because I think in times past where nobody was talking about this,
Right.
you didn't talk about it. And so I do have the benefit of time and experience and shift there. But with us, like, it was a matter of her coming, like, she was an empowered individual. And I think it's, you know, people want to paint women as the victim, but I think that I think it's disrespectful to a partner to not let them make their own choice. And if they're going into this with eyes open and they want to make that choice, and in some cases it may not work, but you know, with the divorce rate today being what it is, lots of marriages don't work for lots and lots of reasons.
But that's not deterministic either. I mean, it's still a statistic.
Yeah.
Your lives are your lives.
Right. And so my thing was, like, if I'm going to get married, I'm going to do it in the most healthy way I know how. And I'd seen lots and lots of success stories and lots of not so successful stories. And having the benefit of being able to learn from both, all I knew was that I'm making the choices that I feel like are going to be most healthy for me and for us. And everything was on the table with both of us. And we both felt like this is what we really want to do. And there wasn't any expectation of, like, you know, there's the old saying that, like, women go into marriage hoping that their husbands will change. Yeah. Men going into marriage hoping their wives will change or will stay the same, but inevitably both are disappointed, or something like that. Yeah. But there's this idea, but both of us went into this marriage like this. We don't have this expectation that either of us are going to change in this way or that. Like, this is a commitment that we're making to each other, that we love each other and we're going to build our lives together, and we want it, and we're choosing it. We're doing it with eyes wide open, and we feel really good about it. And more than anything, feeling emotionally good about it. I mean, and we both felt very just guided. I mean, there was definitely that divine thread. I mean, I felt like we were kind of riding a spiritual wave, so to speak, because everything felt so right.